Hello, folks, and welcome to Real Estate Q&A. I'm your host, Greg Delane. Today on the show, I have a gentleman that is a second-generation real estate broker. His mom started the franchise in the basement. With that, let me give you Mark Nadler. Mark, how are you?
Hi, Greg. Good to be here. Thanks.
Look, thanks so much for coming. This show is about real estate, and one of the things I always say is that experience is the difference. So I try to have experienced people on our show that can talk about real things. And as I look at your bio, you've been in the business since 1982.
Long time.
Well, Mark, people don't know that back then you could get your license at 10 years old. Right? Tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to be sitting in the seat with me.
I as you said, am a second-generation broker. My mom started the company back in 1981 and had been in the business for about 5-6 years and decided she wanted to open her own office and began it out of the basement of her house and did very well fairly quickly and moved into a storefront in 1984 and soon after, unfortunately, became ill. And I took a leave of absence from the job I was in and started with the idea of running her company for about a year. And here I am 28 years later. Wow. And the company has done well. My mom, unfortunately, didn't ultimately survive the illness. And, here I am. So, but I have had my license since I'm about 18 years old. And I've been a broker since probably about 21. So, again, this is somewhat second nature at this point.
Now, what was the name of the company when your mom started it?
It's always been Centennial Realty, and we became part of the Prudential Network in 1994, which is a franchise, and we've been the largest franchise of Prudential in Westchester.
Wow.
And since that point.
Well, that's about the time I got into business, was right around 94, and I started with a gold jacket. I was at Century 21. And I had a gold jacket, starting with Nick Wolf, I'm sure you know Nick. Let me just start off with this question, because everybody wants to know this when I have people on the show. How's the market?
Well, I always answer that question by saying it depends. It depends on whether you're a buyer, a seller, a tenant, or an investor. And so I always like to kind of reframe it and look at it from those aspects, because depending on which one of those people you may be, you'll find, to a certain extent, a different answer.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I know that as we were talking about before the show, I went on a couple listing appointments, and when the people were telling me what price they had to have, I said, the buyers, people buying things determine what things are worth. And when that price gets to the point where people will buy it, that's what they'll do. I'd love to. You can put your house on for $6 million, even though you're only going to get $450. You can put it on for $6 million, but what it will do is sell another house, because usually, if there are two houses in there, the same condition, same setup, and one's $80,000 overpriced, well, it doesn't have to be overpriced, but it has to compare with the other one. And if the other one's $80,000 less, you would do the same thing. You would buy the one that on a lesser price.
Well, in this market, pricing is critical to someone who wants to sell. And so, speaking from the position of a seller, if your property is not priced well, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to sell property in this market. And sometimes you have people like you're talking about who put their house on too high and ultimately chase the market, as we call it, down, chasing after the number that keeps going lower that they're not going to get. Our preferred strategy has been at points showing people the reality of what the pricing is for that house, that neighborhood, that particular property, and pricing it attractively. And then if we're accurate in situations like that, we'll sell it close to the asking price, or if we do better than expected, above the asking price in what is still happening as a bidding war. Now, people don't believe that bidding wars still take place, but indeed they do if the property is priced well. And I could name several properties in the last 2-3 weeks which you're seeing go into bidding wars and being sold. So a little bit of it depends on where you're talking about, what community, what town. We have offices in Scarsdale, we have offices in Larchmont, and we cover the surrounding towns of both those areas. And the market in each of the communities is a little bit different. But what you're finding is that the more affluent communities are doing fairly well in this market. And but again, within reason and if the prices are accurate.
Absolutely. I have a couple listings that we are going to have to restructure the price. And for you new agents out there, I call it a price improvement. Don't ever call it a price reduction. We're talking about a price improvement to improve their opportunity to sell their house. And I remember when I first got into business, I was such a detailed person with my buyers, my sellers that were looking to sell their property, that I would take them with me. We'd go on adventure to look at all their competition, because if you're just staying in your own house telling me that, well, Mrs. Brown got $650, and you act like you think it's yesterday, but that was 6 years ago. Mrs. Brown got that $650. Those prices are no longer here. But it is very important to have them start off on the right foot. If you don't, it's going to be a...
But there's a reason why I don't like doing, or I don't like agents doing what you just mentioned, and I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing the idea, but there's a problem in the business with agents and sometimes owners who compare their properties to other properties which are currently for sale. Mm-hmm. And as you know and I know, what ends up happening, sometimes those properties don't sell at all.
Yes.
Or they don't sell anywhere near the price that they were listed at when the person saw it. So I actually have somebody who 2 weeks ago did exactly what you just suggested. Mm-hmm. He took somebody, one of my agents, took somebody to see a couple properties that were on the market and would possibly be competition for their home should it come on the market. And the problem with that is the seller, the potential seller of this other property, went, saw these houses, said, oh, my house is nicer than both of these. And therefore, the pricing I should be having is
higher
there. And what we stopped and said, well, look how many days on market this property's been on. Look at where the price started. Look where it's been reduced to. And actually, even in the last couple days, one of the houses that this person compared their property to was just reduced $200,000. And so, again, if you make a decision as a seller, pricing your property against other properties that are on the market, it's castles in the air theory. Yeah. Castles come crashing on down, and you're left standing there where it doesn't make sense. So as hard as it is to believe and as hard as it is to accept, often as a seller, the reality is that when you price that property close to where it belongs, time helps you, it doesn't hurt you, as it does when you're on the market for too long. And you'll get a better percentage, you'll get closer to your price, or you'll go above, and you'll end up ultimately with a higher selling price than if you go the other direction. But, again, statistically that's proven, but people don't often want to hear that or want to believe that because it's easier said than done.
Do you guys hear that? My audience out here, did you just hear what he said? That was made perfect sense to me. I think that I should have clarified me taking people to other properties, because I'm normally doing that because they think that their bathroom that hasn't been worked on in 10 years or 20 years is okay, and I want to, when I show them a listing and it says all new windows, all new kitchen just done, granite countertops, and I got to let them see those things. But the way you explain that, you make a good point.
Yeah, no, well, again, I'm not trying to be critical of what you were saying, but and that is the problem, because those properties that are on the market, if it's $1 million today, and the prospective seller looks at his house and compares it and thinks his house is either better, or even if it's not better, and prices their house in relationship to that first house, now in 6 months, if that house has come down in price from $1 million to $750,000, and their house is now at $800,000, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, wow. That I was stunned when you said that they reduced it $200,000. See, I'm not in that market. That was amazing to me. You said 200. They reduced it $200,000. Well, let me ask you this question. Now that the subprime 100% financing, no money down, no income verification. The debacle that went on starting in, I think it was, I'd say 2006, 2007, has the market settled? Is it starting to climb again? Is the plane taking off again?
You know, I don't want to sound as if all the answers are bad answers. The answer, my answer to your question though, is that we're still seeing a lot of fallout from people who have purchased in the last 4, 5, 6 years, and many of the circumstances there are very difficult. Now, I go back in my memory and I compare some of this to when I first started in the early 80s, and you had a very difficult market then also, where you had interest rates at 17%, and financing was an altogether different challenge and a different type. There wasn't much funding available. The rates were very high, and when you start having people trying to qualify for loans at 17%, it cuts into their ability to buy anything right away. So that was a very difficult market. Then in memory, I next think about the 1987 stock market crash, and then the market we had, it really probably which bottomed out, I would think, somewhere about 1990, 91, 92. And that was also a difficult period where people who had purchased in the late 80s very much were in a position where they were selling short and not able to recoup what they had paid for their property. And I actually am a buyer like that myself. I actually purchased, for everybody who's out there thinking about purchasing a property, thinking that if you ever find yourself selling for less than you paid, it's a bad thing. The answer is the market is the market, and
yes,
you can't control the timing. So I purchased my co-op that I used to live in 1987. The market crashed in October of 87. And when I sold my place in 1996, I sold it for 40% less than I paid for it, which meant coming up with money out of my pocket to pay off my loan and to make the bank basically whole and get out of there. And you know, people always are like, well, that's terrible. And I'm like, yeah, it was bad. But the positive side of the story, and again, I think many buyers should really pay attention to this in this market. The positive side of it is the house I ultimately bought at the same period as I was selling in last time was down several $100,000
sure,
in value.
yes,
And so the savings I got by buying that house far exceeded the loss on the co-op. And then you stop and look at what the interest rates were at the time in 1996 when I purchased, and they weren't as sweet as they are now.
they were
but
like
they
13
certainly,
or something.
no, they were about 7 to 8%.
Okay.
Back in '96.
Okay.
And so I think my mortgage then was a 7% financing. So at the end of the day, I actually was ahead.
Wow.
Than if my co-op, let's just say, had appreciated, might have been 10% higher, and the house I was buying might have been the same 10%, 15% higher. I would have lost a lot more money in net purchasing power than I did. So this is a conversation I have with our agents and a lot of our sellers now frequently, which is, I understand the emotional impact of selling a property for less than you paid for it. But that said, if you can get past the emotional part of it and deal with the financial, meaning if you have the assets to pay off the first mortgage,
yes,
and you still have a down payment and you can buy your next house, you're probably going to do very well. And we're seeing a lot of buyers who are using this market as the opportunity of a lifetime
yes,
to buy the next bigger house.
yeah,
And if again you can get past the emotional piece of selling at a number less than you paid, and if you can get past the paying off the financial part of it, obviously.
do you have to go for therapy for that? Because I know we're talking about it can shake you to your core to have things in place and children, and you're moving ahead, and this is the plan, and a drop in the market can just shake everybody. I will say this though, Mark. I think that the meltdown, or whatever we need to call it, and the banks weren't completely all wrong for this. A lot of people knew they couldn't afford certain things, and if you were working at Dunkin' Donuts and they were writing you a loan for $500,000, you know. So I can't blame the banks for everything. But one thing I know is that I want to stand up and applaud anybody that's still in this business, the real estate industry, because we are the ones there. I remember when I first got into business, there were like 4,000 agents, and then it skyrocketed up to about 9,000 or 10,000, and half of them were untrained. I remember closing both sides of the deal, although I wasn't getting a commission from the other side because the other agent didn't know what they were doing. And me representing my seller, I had to do the best job I could to get the deal closed, and I had to help the other person. Well, a lot of these people, and I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of these people are no longer in the business. The quick buck. And then they came out with all these reality shows, Flip This House, and people just, oh, I can do that tomorrow. I'll be a mogul tomorrow. And all that has left our business. And the people that are in the business now are solid. And the new agents coming into the business, they don't know the difference. I know when I first came in '94, and people were complaining about, the market, I didn't have anything to compare it with. So I just did what my broker told me to do. And Nick said, do this, do this, do this. And we'll get to that when you get there. Just do these things. And I did them, and it worked out for me because I didn't know. And a lot of these agents coming, they say that the next top producers aren't even in the business yet. The top producers for 3 or 4 years from now haven't even taken a real estate license, No,
well, it's probably true. And, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the impact the technology has made on the business. And, you talk to new agents now about it, and a lot of them really don't know from anything different. But, back in the quote-unquote old days, when we would evaluate a property to do it and do it professionally, do it well, it would take hours and hours and hours. And that's because you were looking up everything manually in those old MLS books.
I have them.
You were looking up those old quarterly comparable sale books, and nothing was computerized. And
the yellow one, the red one, and the black one.
I actually always tell the story. I remember buying our first computer for the company. This is when I still worked for IBM before I got into the real estate business. We bought an IBM XT. I think it was the second generation of PC that was out at the time. That computer cost me, using an employee discount from IBM at the time, I think it was $6,000.
Holy camoli.
And I think my watch probably has more computing power now than that thing had.
Yeah, but, I tell agents that back then I had to physically drive to the office, go in the back. There was a big board with slots in it. I would find my slot that had some messages in it, and then I'd have to go to my desk and sit down and make a call. And certainly these cell phones do more than all the offices combined back then.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I was doing BPOs back then before it was done on internet, and I was when I first started, Mark, and I don't want to get into war stories, but when I first started, I was doing 40 BPOs a month because nobody knew me. I had to make a living. And I had a part-time job, but I was using the old cameras where you hit the button and it comes out and you had to dry it off, the pictures. I had to take these pictures, then physically mail them in, and they gave me like 4 days to do them. And they were only paying like $40 a BPO. But I learned so much when I did those because I was at the building departments. I wasn't expecting anybody to teach me other than the company I was working for, but I made pretty good income because once they start coming in, getting those checks, it really helped me, but it taught me a lot.
Well, and you're right, and frankly, it's so much work though for so little return nowadays that I haven't pursued my appraisal license because I'm really not looking to do appraisals for the sake of the amount of time they take for relative to what your fees are. It's very difficult. But
I started my appraisal course. I took ethics and standards. And then I just said, no, you know what, I'm going to do something else. This is not, real estate is so big and there's so many different avenues you can go into that wasn't my niche. I did go to a AHIT, American Home Institute of Inspectors, and I graduated from that. Never did an inspection, but I just wanted to learn a little bit more about the house, about the structural, because I was doing so many foreclosures that I wanted to see this house as a home inspector, I wanted to see it as a broker, and I wanted to see it as a possible buyer, and I wanted to increase my knowledge in the business. As you know, now you might not have to go for continuing education. You were grandfathered in, huh?
Yes, I'm exempt. If you were a licensed broker for more than 15 years as of 2007, I think?
Yeah.
2007, you're exempt from having to go for continuing education. But, again, I give the state credit for trying to, I call it raise the bar.
Sure.
So that people who are in the industry are required to go out and willingly or unwillingly learn something.
Sure.
And know something a little bit more. I give you a lot of credit. For example, I think that's a great idea, having taken the inspectors training class.
Yes. Because
you're right. It's so much, not that we're contractors, not that we're inspectors, but so much of our work revolves around properties. And one of the things we do in our company as well is we will have engineer inspectors come in, speak to our agents, and we have often also taken inspectors take our new agents to a property to walk them through, to point out the very basic things they should be seeing. Because, it gets into a situation where in this business, you find that your experience, if it's positive, comes back to help you.
Yes.
So many transactions end up falling apart when you have agents putting them together who really aren't experienced, don't have the training, like you said a minute ago. And so somebody goes into a property, and let's just say for argument's sake, the house has an oil heating system, and the agent doesn't point it out to the buyer, and they don't focus on it, and they put together a transaction, and now they go and work out their deal. They bring the inspector in. The inspector walks in and says to the buyer, prospective buyer, well, that's an oil heating system, oil steam. You've got a 500-gallon oil tank in the corner there. And, most people want gas nowadays, blah, blah, blah. And the buyers look at each other and say, you know what? I didn't realize we're buying a house with an oil heating system. Why didn't you tell me that?
That's right.
And next thing you know, they're backing out of the transaction. So, I find that when agents know more what they're doing with regard to it, they put better transactions together that don't fall apart later.
Yes.
And that also goes into one of my other kind of theories in the business, which is you have a lot of people who walk around as buyers with their agents, look at a property once, will spend 20 minutes, half hour there, and come walking out of there and want to make an offer on it. And they'll call the broker who has a listing, here's our offer, we're going to submit this offer, this terms. And one of the things we teach our agents is that offer has a greater likelihood of falling apart, excuse me, because the buyer hasn't seen it more than once.
Yes.
And, I always use the analogy, you go to look at a car that you're going to buy very often more than once. You spend more than 20 minutes to a half hour in it. This is the house you're going to live, you're going to raise your family in. You think you're comfortable seeing it one shot.
Yeah.
Sometimes people leave the visit with the realtor, they don't remember what the house has.
That's right.
So we always encourage people as buyers, clients, as listing brokers, as selling agents, we always encourage our clients and the other people involved in the transaction to look at the property more than once before they final negotiate a transaction. Because if you saw it the first time during the day, you haven't seen it at night, it may look very different.
The three biggest financial decisions you'll ever make is, and not in this order, but it's marriage, it's children, and it's buying your first home. And you got to, because you're going to have to raise that house like a child, so you got to spend some time with it. Our time is going so fast. We only got like 3 minutes left, Mark. I want you to tell me a little bit about how great Prudential is and the training and what's going on there, the technology, and what's going on for new agents that are thinking about coming to an office.
Well, our firm is one of the largest in the county. There's 800-something companies in Westchester. We are in the top 8 or top 9 based on our sales volume. And I say that proudly because having started in that basement, it's taken a lot of work, and I always kind of jokingly say blood, sweat, and tears to get to where we are. Part of that is based on the skill and talent of our new agents and the training that they receive in our company, which is very much hands-on. I will work with a new agent in terms of going with them on listings. We have a vice president in our company who will do the same. The assistants with regard to a negotiation. We don't want our agents out there swimming on their own.
Yes.
And it's either sink or swim mentality, which we find that some firms will bring in a whole mass of people and turn them loose and see what happens, and hope that
reflects back on you.
Hope they come back. We'll hire fewer people. We'll put a little more effort into those people.
Yes.
And hopefully have better results.
That's the best way to go about it. I think that our office will be having a tour to the building department. Same way I was taught. I'm taking you to the assessor's office, to the tax. I'm taking you up to the building department, and I might say, okay, where do you live? You live at 135 Banana Street. I want all the information you can get me on that property, and we'll all meet down here. We have 1 hour, and I want you to get me the real taxes. I don't want the taxes with the senior star, veteran star. I want the real taxes that a buyer will be paying if he buys this house. So if you don't spend the time and really take people out the way I was taken, those mistakes are going to happen down the road. You just can't put a cake together in 5 minutes and you wonder why it didn't taste well.
But you know what happens though, Greg? The problem is a lot of the agents look to companies, and sometimes where the principal broker or the manager doesn't have the ability to supervise them and supervise them well. They're looking for things that they affiliate with that company for, which may be the wrong reasons to affiliate.
Yes.
Whatever it might be. And sometimes it puts the brokers and those companies in a position where they don't have the time or ability to spend with the agents, teaching them, taking them, training them, and making them great agents.
And Prudential does that.
Well, I don't want to say Prudential does that, but Prudential Centennial Realty does that.
Well, Mark, we're down to 46 seconds. I want you to, how many kids you have?
I've got 3 kids.
Okay, let's speak to them. Say hi to them, because they're going to see this on cable.
Hi, Audrey. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Matthew. Hi, Vicki.
Okay, and I want you guys out there to know that me and your dad was just talking about a couple pair of great sneakers that he might be, we're just considering it. But listen, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want everybody out here that sees this show to know that they can come on and tell me about your company, tell me your experience in real estate. And for the new agents, I want you to know that it takes patience and consistent action. Patience and consistent action. Mark, thanks so much for coming.
Greg, thank you. A pleasure.